Star Wars, a series that spans generations, multiple trilogies, and an ever-growing variety of books and TV shows that have managed to etch itself in the heart of fans ever since its arrival in 1977. It has seen many ups and downs over the years, but has consistently remained a pop culture icon since its release in theaters. As of the release of The Rise of Skywalker, Star Wars has seen its ninth entry into the story, not counting its prequel succeeding installments, Rogue One and Solo, which tells the story of a group of ragtag rebels before the events of the original film that started it all. A New Hope. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where this tale truly begins. Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope was written, directed, and produced by series creator George Lucas, who initially developed the story under the simple title of Star Wars. Yeah, really. Real creative, isn't it? Telling the story of the journey of the Wills, with the main protagonist being a commander by the name of Mace Windu. Foreshadowing, perhaps? This is a far cry from the story we know today, as many of the elements in this draft were abandoned and bear very little resemblance to the final product. The fourth and final draft became the story we all know today. Luke Skywalker, a young farm boy, inadvertently acquires a pair of droids that possess stolen architectural plans for a mysterious battle station known as the Death Star. When the Empire begins a destructive search for the missing droids, Skywalker accompanies Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi on a mission to return the plans to the Rebel Alliance and rescue Princess Leia from her imprisonment by the Empire. While this seemed simple enough, at the time many people doubted Star Wars to be a success, not even most of the actors working on the film. Actor Kenny Baker, who played R2-D2, later confessed he thought the film would be a failure, while Harrison Ford, the actor behind Han Solo, thought it strange that there was a princess with weird buns in her hair, and he called Chewbacca a giant in a monkey suit. However, despite the skepticism it faced, the film became a massive success, exceeding all expectations and essentially becoming a pop culture phenomenon overnight. As a result, a sequel would be developed under the title The Empire Strikes Back. This plot point would be subsequently expanded upon greatly in George Lucas's prequel trilogy, but the main focus of the then underdeveloped story would start with a crucial plot point that would change the face of Star Wars forever. In The Empire Strikes Back, Darth Vader is in pursuit of Luke Skywalker and the rest of the Rebel Alliance. While Vader relentlessly pursues the small band of Luke's friends, Han Solo, Princess Leia, and others across the galaxy, Luke studies the Force under Jedi Master Yoda. When Vader captures Luke's friends, Luke must decide whether to complete his training and become a full Jedi Knight or to confront Vader and save them. In the end, however, it is revealed that Vader had not killed Luke's father, but that he was Luke's father. Due to this plot twist, Lucas began envisioning a series depicting the story of Anakin Skywalker and his subsequent fall to the dark side. Because of this, The Empire Strikes Back became known as Episode 5, while the original film was retitled Episode 4, A New Hope. The final film of the original trilogy was Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, which brought the story established in Episode 4 to a close. In Episode 6, the Galactic Empire, under the direction of the ruthless Emperor, is constructing a second Death Star in order to crush the Rebel Alliance once and for all. Since the Emperor plans to personally oversee the final stages of its construction, the Rebel fleet launches a full-scale attack on the Death Star in order to prevent its completion and kill the Emperor, effectively bringing an end to the Empire's hold over the galaxy. Meanwhile, Luke Skywalker struggles to bring his father back to the light side of the Force. In the end, Luke was successful in his quest, and Vader died as Anakin Skywalker. Yet this was not the end of his story. At the time of his supposed end, very little was revealed about Vader's past, which would not be covered in greater detail until the late 1990s, where George Lucas developed the Star Wars prequel trilogy, which would bring the story full circle, beginning with the first infamous entry of the prequel trilogy, The Phantom Menace. The film is set 32 years before the original film and follows Jedi Knights Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi as they protect Queen Amidala in hopes of securing a peaceful end to a large-scale interplanetary trade dispute. Joined by Anakin Skywalker, a young slave with unusually strong natural powers of the Force, they simultaneously contend with the mysterious return of the Sith. The prequel story would continue in the sequel, Attack of the Clones. Set 10 years after the events of the previous film, the galaxy is on the brink of a civil war. Led by former Jedi named Count Dooku, thousands of planetary systems threaten to secede from the Galactic Republic. After Senator Padme Amidala evades assassination, Jedi apprentice Anakin Skywalker becomes her protector, while his mentor Obi-Wan Kenobi investigates the attempt on Padme's life. Soon, Anakin, Padme, and Obi-Wan witness the onset of a new threat to the galaxy, the Clone Wars, an event only hinted at in the original film. Anakin's fall is finally explored in the final prequel film, Revenge of the Sith. The film begins 3 years after the onset of the Clone Wars. The Jedi Knights are spread across the galaxy, leading a massive war effort against the Separatists. The Jedi Council dispatches Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi to eliminate the notorious General Grievous, leader of the Separatist army. Meanwhile, Jedi Anakin Skywalker grows close to Palpatine, the Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic, and, unknown to the public, a Sith Lord. Their deepening friendship threatens the Jedi Order, the Republic, and Anakin himself. As stated earlier, Star Wars wasn't meant to be as successful as it was, but for its time it was a huge success and managed to become ingrained in pop culture overnight, spanning not only 2 successful sequels, but a plethora of books, merchandise, and other memorabilia, essentially becoming hugely marketable and popular for many decades to come. The problem in its wake was something that would eventually come to haunt the Star Wars franchise due to the fact George Lucas essentially created a franchise that transcended the imagination: world building. This isn't immediately apparent, especially during the production of the films initially, and like any films, ideas and concepts had to be planned out years in advance, and sometimes they did change during the course of a production. This, however, did cause some retroactive flaws in the original trilogy, most notably with several of its main characters, as well as minor inconveniences that would only grow due to the narrative of the later produced prequel trilogy, the most glaring being the relationship between the protagonists and the antagonists. For example, Luke and Leia initially had a brief romantic attraction to one another in Episode 4, albeit very toned down and limited to a single kiss, which was watered down to playful flirting in Episode 5, then practically non-existent in Episode 6. The explanation for this was that they were siblings the whole time. In retrospect, they mixed their kiss in Episode 5 extremely awkward, with the only good news being it put an end to what is essentially the galaxy's only possible love triangle. Then there's the fact that Darth Vader is Luke's father, one of the greatest plot twists ever put to cinema because it was an idea that no one would have considered due to the information we were already presented with. Most of the issues that plague the original trilogy are leaked from ideas that conflict with the prequel trilogy, such as the Clone Wars being vastly different from what was presented in Episode 2 when it was eventually released. Originally, the idea of the Clone Wars was more literal, with the clones being actual people that were clones of characters and individuals across the galaxy, as opposed to an army made from a single host. This can be attributed to the fact that George Lucas hadn't had the time to flesh out ideas or even revise them. He hadn't had any plans to do a prequel trilogy at first, not even wanting to direct The Phantom Menace, but at the time, many directors were not all too keen on taking on a big project during the prequel's initial production. However, due to the time spent between films, many ideas that George Lucas had would cause a rift between himself and Star Wars fans across the world. With the massive success of Star Wars came the responsibility of telling a story centered around several groups of people in chapters of life to fully realize a universe centered around one man, Darth Vader. Thus began the reason for a change of direction in the franchise. Initially, the story was about the efforts of Luke Skywalker and his friends to bring an end to the tyrannical reign of the Empire that controlled the galaxy. However, starting with The Phantom Menace, the story became a saga about the Skywalker family and their efforts against the tyranny of the dark side. However, unlike the other films, The Phantom Menace is regarded as being the worst of the entire series, largely due to the fact that despite being the origin story for the majority of the characters and events explained in little detail in A New Hope, the film itself was just not needed because of how far back it sets the story for the Skywalker family, particularly Anakin Skywalker himself, given that the prequel trilogy about his fall to the dark side, which really the movie itself does little to set up overall. It sows the seeds for what would become major plot points in Episode 2 and 3, but Episode 1 really doesn't have much of a place in the story other than being a true prequel. Indeed, if told from Obi-Wan's perspective, The Phantom Menace would probably have had some better reception to it because it would see the young Jedi grow, at least partially, into the elder, wiser hermit he was introduced as. Alas, if there is one problem that is very glaring in The Phantom Menace, it is that there isn't a clearly defined protagonist to follow. Qui-Gon Jinn plays the role for majority of the film's first act, since it is he that goes out to deal with the problems that are in his way, and not Obi-Wan, who is analogous with Luke during this time, and it is Qui-Gon that discovers Anakin in this film to set him on the path to become a Jedi. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan is just taking the background in most of these events, which makes sense since Qui-Gon is the more experienced of the two. The problem is that because so much focus is given to Qui-Gon during this portion of the film, and the fact that everyone else is a sitting duck, there is literally nothing for the supporting cast to do while Qui-Gon is having his time in the sun. However, even after that, little is done until the return of Naboo, as the film centers on politics to help Naboo in a legal fashion, so Palpatine can become Chancellor to set up his role as the Emperor in the original trilogy. Our main heroes who we spend the first act getting to know are essentially wasted just discussing things to set up character development during the second act, and it isn't even until the third act of the film that any real action takes place in any meaningful way. The closest we even get to this is the film's climax, where everyone is involved in the final battle. And I do mean everyone. Case in point, Anakin. Anakin is stupidly placed in a space battle. Padme leads a group of rebels to take back the palace. The Gungans act as a distraction so that the Trade Federation is led away from the city, and the Jedi face off against Darth Maul in order to have a giant final battle with everyone we've gotten to know. Well, this is just terrible. Why, you may ask? Because even though we've seen most of these characters over the course of the film, some of them just don't have a reason to be in the battle. Anakin has no reason to be in the space battle. At all. He just really doesn't. Just look at episode 4. The group is relatively small, and everybody there has to play a role in order to escape the Death Star. Obi-Wan, despite not being the main character, went to deactivate the tractor beam that kept the heroes from leaving, while Luke, our protagonist, went with his group to save Leia, who was being held captive on the Death Star at the time. Even the droids have something to do. Even though they're useless in a fight, they ensure the heroes survive by acting as advisors during events where the heroes are trapped or otherwise in life-threatening situations. The only time anybody's left out to be a sitting duck is during the Battle of Yavin. Despite the potential to be wiped out, Leia or any other general in the Rebel Alliance doesn't order evacuation of any kind to ensure their survival. Though this could be contributed to the stakes of the film, emphasizing the battle of the Death Star as a last stand, since at the time it was a standalone film, the issue is that everybody has a role to play. Not given roles just because they're main protagonists or characters. If you take Anakin out of the space battle, it could be essentially the same thing. Anybody could take his role. But the problem with the prequels is plot, plot, plot. Everything just has to happen because of the plot. Then there's Attack of the Clones, which suffers from its own problems. Like the previous film, the story does little to further Anakin's fall to the dark side, once again focusing on the downfall of the Republic itself. But it does set up several key points that would ultimately be the cause for his downfall, most notably his relationship with Padme, which would come to a head in the final film, Revenge of the Sith. However, the romance in the film, awkward dialogue notwithstanding, is extremely forced, trying to emphasize why they shouldn't fall in love with dialogue, yet at the same time having them fall in love via actions throughout the films. Other key problems include the creation of a clone army in the film. The previous film established that a Trade Federation had a droid army, while Episode 2 established that several worlds had droid armies of their own. So let me ask you this. How is it that a republic that has stood for 1,000 generations didn't have a large-scale army as a contingency in the event of war?